We are just 3 days away from the NFL draft. We've gone over some of the most under and overrated players, in my opinion, in this year's class. A lot of guys in the first round, second round, maybe third round. Here, we're going to go over some guys that I don't think are getting talked about enough and are real sleepers in this class. There are a lot of, third round guys, maybe even second round guys. But even then, I still think they should be talked about more, or I think they're still so heavily undervalued with where they are. And I also just kind of want to touch on some extra guys in the later rounds that I really like while going through this process. And I kind of want to get my opinion out there and help you guys so you can have maybe an eye on them while this draft comes up. So if your favorite team maybe picks one of these guys, you can be kind of excited and maybe have a little leg up on everyone else and say, hey, I know this guy might actually be pretty good that we took in the later rounds. Because always, every single year, there are guys in the NFL draft that fall down for whatever reason, and you end up getting a steal because they end up being great. It happens all the time. That's what's great about the draft. But let's go ahead and let's dive into my sleepers for the 2025 NFL draft. We only have one quarterback on this list. Yes, only one. And it is going to be Dillon Gabriel out of Oregon. I have him as my QB5, and I have him as like a late third round to anywhere in the fourth round kind of pick. He has kind of fallen off a bit in talks like during the draft process, but I still feel like he has a potential like viable spot as a quarterback with some value, with some potential like valuable ability to actually maybe spot start in different areas, and you can get him on maybe late day 3. Is kind of where he's supposed to go. He's experienced, has played a ton, does a good job going through reads. He has played in Oregon, and most recently before that, I believe it was at Oklahoma. Has transferred, few times. Played much lower beforehand, but he's much older. But he's very experienced. He just within the Oregon offense, I think compared to a lot of these other quarterbacks, it wasn't like Bo Nix 2.0, but it was just another very experienced, like great success who doesn't just throw to the open man. Like he does a good job actually progressing through his reads, which is very valuable for a start now kind of NFL quarterback that you might need to help. Maybe you need some help and need a guy that can play right now. That's a giant aspect of that, and he's kind of already got that compared to everyone else in this class. Size is a factor, though. He's like Tua's size, but maybe even smaller. Very much of a lesser arm compared to these other guys. Smaller hands and arms. He really needs to be like use his athleticism, and he's like not a bad athlete, but he didn't test maybe as good as some people would think. He needs to be just as athletic. I think Brock Purdy for me is kind of like the thing of like, all right, well, if you don't have that arm or something like that, like, are you athletic? And Purdy is like kind of that middle ground where he's just athletic enough to get away from some of the defenders. If you watch some of the games, there were a lot of times where he was running around in the backfield. So he's kind of just athletic, and I think Gabriel kind of falls relatively close to that. He does a good job protecting the football, doesn't really turn it over. He throws just such a catchable pass, like a very nice job throwing a catchable ball, which is good in some areas. Obviously, you're probably not going to do stuff where you got to whiz it in there, but that's not really his thing. He doesn't really panic either. Does not panic under pressure. Very high IQ. Very good pocket presence. All three stuff I really like. His size is just kind of the biggest knockback. But, I mean, what's probably going to be a day 3 pick? I think you should go pull the trigger for a guy who's honestly just better than a lot of these other guys in this class right now. And for a team that might need a starter or help depth-wise right now for a quarterback that gets injured a lot, I think this is a great pick in the day 3, 4th through 5th, maybe 6th if he falls there rounds. I think that's a good spot for him. I think he's like a less talented but more mobile Tua. And when I mean less talented, I mean absolutely less talented. Or like a current Russell Wilson, kind of like that, which Russell Wilson is a starting quarterback. Like he is. He's objectively a top 32 quarterback in the NFL. So I think that's kind of what he could be. And I feel like him going that low, I think it's just a little too low, in my opinion. Next up, we're going to go through some running backs. I have Damian Martinez out of Miami. He is around my 8th to 10th running back in this class, and I have him as a mid-third round pick. In this loaded halfback class, I think Martinez stands out for sure as like safe early down back with some real good, powerful upside to make a real impact while playing an underrated role in terms of the early down back. I think that's a little bit of an underrated role. He's a really good runner, just purely. He, although, cannot be on the field on third down. He just can't. Does not really provide a lot of stuff for that on third down, unless you're doing, power eye, like 3rd and 1, whatever. Even then, sometimes you want a little bit of a better receiver on the field just because you can do rollouts and fakes, stuff like that. But the only time he can really be on the field on third down is if it's like 3rd and very short and you're just trying to push through. That's what he can do. Other than that, not a receiver. Not that kind of shifty guy. But very good for a powerful early down back that is just a good pure runner. He's a good athlete for his size. He's only had 1 fumble in 3 years, although he hasn't gotten a lot of touches in those 2 years, but he only had 1 fumble this year with a lot of carries. Has gotten a ton of work. Very good early down back, like I said, which I think can help a ton for offenses who struggle to consistently convert on third downs. The closer you get on first and second down, the easier it makes every single third down, and potentially an easy fourth down if you're going forward on fourth down. I know we all search for like the high upside, athletic, shifty running backs, or they kind of have to be like, Derrick Henry. But in a class that has like a ton of those and just a lot of different stuff, the higher end of running backs only really has 2 guys that are like this, and it's Caleb Johnson out of Iowa and then Martinez here. And I think that's pretty valuable for a team that might want that. He's only 21 as well, so very young. And I have him compared to like Tyler Algier, which Tyler Algier currently for the Falcons, when he was a pure starter, he was very good, very efficient, just a really good pure runner. Then they, went and got Bijan because of the spot they were in, and obviously we know what Bijan is. But Algier's a really good back, and I think if we didn't have a great running back class this year, which we do, like a team, I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe traded a later pick for Algier, because I think he's a really good actual running back, and I think he is has the potential to be a top 32 running back. Algier does, and Martinez is very similar to that. But in this day and age, he's probably going to be splitting. But that's fine. He'll be the split. Obviously everyone thinks of Montgomery and Gibbs. He can be the Montgomery. They're not the same exact player, but he can kind of be that. And the Gibbs can kind of be someone else. And I think that's very good value for someone that is going like later in the third, maybe falls out of the day 2. I really like him as a value pick there in a position that specifically I think this class maybe is lacking a bit in early down backs. The next running back is RJ Harvey out of UCF. I have him as around my running back 8 or 9, and I also have him as like a mid 3rd round pick. Size is like the only thing keeping this guy down. That is it. He is an anomaly, and one that, with his is kind of anomaly, has succeeded before, so it's not like it's impossible for him to succeed at all. And his consistent success in college gives me a lot more confidence that he can make a potential big impact in the NFL. He had a ton of production, only trailed Ashton Genty with more 10-plus yard runs. He had over 4,500 yards and 43 touchdowns in 3 years, and only started full-time for 2 of them. So one of them he only played half the year. He has a ton of missed tackles force, like a ton, very big burst. Played part quarterback in high school, so he hasn't even been full running back that long. His vision, sometimes people question. I think there were times I had read where he bounced outside a lot when he didn't need to, because he thought he could just beat the corner off the edge, and sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't in college. Well, that's obviously going to be even harder to do in the NFL because they're faster. Maybe they're not as good tacklers, I don't know, but everyone in the NFL is obviously better, so it's going to be a little harder to do. So I think he needs to get better at going through gaps. But he tested really good athletically. He has a 4.4 40, which obviously very much fast enough. And I kind of think he's like a faster Devonta Freeman. If you remember Devonta Freeman, former Atlanta Falcon, he was a 2-time Pro Bowler for them when they went to the Super Bowl, split backs with Tevin Coleman. I think you want to try and picture RJ Harvey with someone. I think his potential is like a Devonta Freeman back when he was really good. It wasn't for too long because Freeman had some injury issues, but that may be what you could be getting with RJ Harvey. And then the third running back here I have is Brashard Smith out of SMU. I have him as like my 9th to 11th running back, and I have him as like a late 3rd or very early 4th round pick. He only has one like real year of production, so it's not a ton, but it was a great year with a college football playoff performance. And while I don't think his ceiling is too high, I think in the right offense he can be very valuable as a pass catching option out of the backfield. This is like, you know, the best running back class. So I think more so with him, like he's the best receiver, which I think says a lot in what we have being the best running back class. So he's the best receiving running back in the whole class, meaning like he can literally line up almost anywhere. Like he can be a slot receiver in some plays because of his great route running. He's not a bad runner. He's just not, I wouldn't use him in heavy chunks, and he's not like a reliable, like, oh yeah, let's get the first down with this guy kind of runner, but very good receiver out of the backfield. And for teams that have younger quarterbacks or that utilize running backs in the receiving game, which I think is super valuable because it's a great safe play when, you know, whatever play you're running doesn't work, should be a priority pickup for them. I kind of view him as like a prime Nyheim Hines, when Nyheim Hines was in his prime, if you remember him, which that was a guy who had almost 1,000 yards total, 7 touchdowns for an 11-win playoff team, being the Colts. And he had unfortunate injuries, so his career kind of tapered off. But I think that's kind of what Smith could be, and maybe at a longer kind of extended time. And you're getting him on day 3. Good value. Really like that. Really like that value. Or the honorable mention I have here for running backs, Marcus Yarns out of Delaware. Not going to do a big deep dive on him, but he's not too far off from Brashard Smith. He's a really good, fun, like 3rd down back from a smaller school who's very much smaller, but actually did pretty good in the Senior Bowl. He's like a discount CJ Spiller. That's kind of what he's like. He's very similar size-wise, relatively similar play style. Like that's kind of what he is, the discount CJ Spiller. And I mean discount, that's what I mean. But still a capable player, I think, in the NFL that could be interesting from a small school in Delaware. Next is going to be receivers. I have like 5 or 6 here. The running back class is very good. I don't think too many of them are underrated. I did list a few, but there's a lot of them that are projected to go high. This receiver class I feel like is being a little underrated, just a little bit, just because I don't know about the huge upside, but I think there's a lot of good, solid guys. First one here is going to be Jack Beck out of TCU. I have him as like my wide receiver 5 or 6, which is definitely higher than others, and I have him as like a for sure 2nd round pick. This past season, great breakout year. Had under 30 catches in 2 years before this season, so first year really starting and totally broke out. He was very good in the Senior Bowl, but just a super polished, like ready right now receiver. He had one of the lowest drop rates in the entire country at 1.6%. Very good blocker, actually, so you can keep him on the field at all times. A very high floor. I don't think he's going to fail at all. Not a crazy athlete, but absolutely like a solid one and definitely a capable one of being on the field consistently versus whoever he's facing. Obviously, some have the edge sometimes, but his just ability and route running, I think, is just really good with how polished he is. But the big thing is he really gives effort in yards after catch, and he is super strong. So you can throw to him on like a 3rd and 8, and if he's crossing in and there's a guy about to come in from the middle of the field, or maybe a safety's down there coming in, he can, and he will, put all of his effort to try and reach out and just get the first down. And he doesn't even have to reach out at sometimes. He could just bull right into you and get the first down, which I think is pretty valuable. So his yards after catch, it's not with just his speed, it's his strength, which I think is a little bit underrated, because if he's going against some of these cornerbacks that are lighter, one broken tackle and boom, you get an extra 10 yards. That's huge value there. Like I said, really good route runner. I think he's just a good wide receiver too. That's what I view him as, a good wide receiver too, like a lesser Puka Nacua, like a similar size, play style-ish to Puka Nacua, but just lesser of a talent because he's not the same athlete, or hasn't at least shown the same kind of contested catch ability that Puka has, but that's kind of the same play style. So I think he's like, if Puka was just a tier below and was more of a wide receiver too, I think that's Jack Beck out of TCU. And then the next guy is out of Iowa State. Yes, I do love both Iowa State players. If you didn't watch my previous video with under and overrated players, go ahead and watch that. But we had Higgins, the receiver at Iowa State, who's ranked a little higher. And I also like this Iowa State receiver. I like both of them. Jalen Noel, or Noel. I don't know how you say the last name. But Jalen out of Iowa State, he is wide receiver 8 to 10, around that range for me. And I have him as a late second round to early third round pick. A guy who really, along with his Iowa State brethren, totally showed out at the Senior Bowl, which I list it here because I do value that if you show that you did really well against very similar draft competition. He is great at changing directions. Like, his change of direction is awesome, which for route running is huge. Like, you can really just totally, essentially, like literally break a guy's ankles if your change of direction is so huge. And if you can get polished route running, like, that could be huge. Really solid slot receiver in my eyes. Has a lot of experience, like a ton. Good catching down the field in uncomfortable spots. He was second in deep yards in the whole country last year. So really good slot deep threat. In terms of the, combine, like I think it definitely helped his stock because they knew he was a good athlete, but they didn't know exactly how good. Well, he showed like a lot more athletic flash than initially thought. And I think for me, definitely it pushed them up the board because we just weren't sure kind of what the athlete he was. But with him being a great athlete, like he had an awesome combine and showing the deep threat ability, like it reminds me so much, especially I used to watch his stats back at Boston College. He reminds me of Zay Flowers. I think he's a little bit of a less polished or just a tiny bit less talented Zay Flowers. But he reminds me of Zay Flowers. That's kind of what this guy reminds me of. Zay Flowers, while he is lower, he is still a wide receiver 1. Like, he may not be obviously an ideal 1, but he still is a wide receiver 1 who would be a really good wide receiver 2 on another team, Zay Flowers. And they're both, mainly in the slot. So I think this is great for a team really lacking any sort of, like, kind of deep threat ability. I think Jalen Noel is your pick there. Next is going to be wide receiver Torrey Holton out of Colorado State. I have him as around my 9th to maybe 11th wide receiver, and I have him as like a mid to late third round pick. Yeah, a lot of these guys kind of in this range here, just because I'm in my mind kind of boosting him up a little bit, just because I really like them. But this guy, he was probably the first real like sleeper here for me because he's projected as like a day 3 guy or like all around. Day 3 when I say that, meaning 4th through 7th round. But I think he's being pushed down due to like his just shorter 2024 that he had. So I mean his other year 2023 was great. So I think the value here is pretty ideal. Very solid size, a little bit more slender, kind of like a George Pickens, DJ Chark kind of build. He had 5 years contributing to a college football team. Like, he consistently played for 5 years in a row and is only 22 years old. So a lot of experience and not too old. Really good route runner. That's kind of where he gets his bread and butter, route running, which I always love those guys. Great intermediate wide receiver, kind of intermediate areas of the field, whether it's between the numbers, outside the hashes, like either one does really good there. Has just had great like work ethic comments from and commitment from different reports and everything like that. So great character guy. Concerns I think are just about him as an athlete in general. I think he didn't test bad, or he didn't test like crazy, but he tested pretty well. Like, I didn't think he was that bad. So I'm not sure why he's getting pushed down so much there. I think he should be moved up accordingly because his tests were not like that bad. Like, he was actually a good athlete. So I would keep an eye on him. I would keep an eye on him to be like a good starter for an extended period of time just because of his consistency and his commitment. I think getting a guy like that, which he's projected day 3, I think that'd be a good target for some teams that might need a wide receiver 3 or a really good wide receiver 4. And I think he could even play up higher to that level. Yeah, Torrey Holton out of Colorado State I like. And then another one here, yes, we got a lot. Jalen Royals out of Utah State. I have him as like my 7th or 9th wide receiver, and I have him as an early third round pick. And I know I don't have a lot of these like high upside guys here, but this year there's real downsides to those type of players that have the gigantic upside. I think way more so than in previous years. When you think of really good past like day 2 or round 2 wide receivers, they just had less downsides, like DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, George Pickens, etc. Guys like Keon Coleman, when he was almost a first round pick, but early second round, like even he would have been definitely a first round pick, or maybe not definitely, but would have probably been a first round pick, or at least ranked higher than some of these other guys than he was in the other class, just because his downsides weren't absurdly different. Like they just weren't absurd compared to these other ones. Like some of the downsides for these high ceiling guys are just pretty big. Like kind of, I forget the guy at a TCU for the Chargers. I'll put the name up here. It's skipping my mind, but like he was immensely talented, but hands were such an issue. Like even some of these guys, they're not the same athlete as he was, but hands are still the issue. So I know I have a lot of low or high floor guys, low ceiling, but that's just what I really like in this kind of range here with receivers. I'll take these guys as the great compliments that they can be. And this is going to be a lot of teams getting their, Tyler Lockett's. That's kind of a big thing, which he's super valuable when he was obviously in his prime. But back to Jalen Royals, really consistent, very balanced receiver. Speed isn't really ideal, but he's not a bad athlete at all. Very quick 10-yard split. So I think he gets off the line of scrimmage super quick, which is very valuable for someone who doesn't have really deep speed. I think he's valuable in like a Dolphins-Broncos kind of offense, except not being the kind of deep guy, being the quick out, get the ball out quickly kind of thing. Not really a deep threat because of his lack of speed, but more so athleticism. But he's great after the catch. He's like a Malachi Corley was last year, who I loved, but he just never really got to play this year for the Jets. They're kind of similar. He has been injured, so that's why he's probably going a little lower. But he's just solid all around, just except of the deep ability. That's kind of the only thing really lacking just because of his speed. But his yards after catch are really good. So I think I really like the Jaden Reed comparison. I think Jaden Reed's a really good comparison here. And Jaden Reed's a little bit of a better athlete, but you see him used in a bunch of different ways. So he's not the exact same like pure gadget guy. But in terms of like doing really good in yak and potential short range, but can take it even farther, I think Jaden Reed's a pretty good comp there. And then we have one more and then two more honorable mentions for receivers. Pat Bryant out of Illinois. He's like my wide receiver 12 to 14, and I have him as like a high priority day 3 pick. He is built for the NFL, basically. He's not a great athlete, though. Definitely the worst athlete on this list. He's objectively slow. He is for the receiver position, but very ideal vertically. Like, vertical testing was great. Had a great year this past year. He was near the top in drop rate. Very good. Contested catch rate, near the top. Yards per route run, near the top. He's been consistent, been a great leader. I think he has a really high floor. He is a worse athlete for both of these comparisons, but like a Keon Coleman, Rashad Bateman kind of type. Like, I think that's a potential there. He's a little less volatile than Keon Coleman, so he doesn't have the same highs, but probably not the same lows, because Keon can go a whole game without doing anything, but he could also rip off, a 80-yard touchdown. And then with Rashad Bateman, like the first time he was actually healthy this year, he was a top 50 wide receiver. So getting a top, not saying he will be, but let's say a little bit lower, getting a top 65 or something like that, or 75 wide receiver in day 3, like, that's really good, because a lot of guys above aren't going to potentially do that. So I think he's just a really high floor. He's more likely, like I said, lower than the two guys I said, but I think he can be like a reliable wide receiver 3, just rotating like on the outside. So not a slot guy at all, but if you have a good slot, like, he can rotate in with maybe two other guys where they're both way better and they just want to get breaks, or maybe one of them's a wide receiver 1 and he's the wide receiver 2 on the outside but rotates with someone. So if the wide receiver 3, 4, like, I think that can be really good. Just not like fully relied upon like all the time. His athletic kind of prowess prohibits that. But especially when he's not used correctly. If he's not used correctly, like, and just send him outside, man on one-on-one, send him on, routes that require all this speed and acceleration. Like, that would just be very poor usage. But I would understand the Kenny Galladay comparison concerns, But, I mean, Kenny Galladay, the reason everyone knows him is because he got paid for a reason. He got paid to the Giants and obviously sucked after, but he got paid for a reason. He was really good for like 3 years with the Lions. And this would be a really late pick. So if you get that from this guy, that's immense success. Plus, I think Pat is nowhere near the mindset of Kenny Galladay when he was leaving and didn't just wanted his money. But I don't think Pat's ceiling is necessarily all these guys. I think he's a step below. But still a guy that I think is just worth more than the day 3 price tag. I do like that. 2 honorable mentions. Andrew Armstrong out of Arkansas had a great year. Tested really well athletically. He's a little more slender, but really good contested catch success. Only had 1 touchdown last year, but he had 13 2 years ago. So I think that's just kind of based on a lot of external stuff around him. He's nothing crazy, but is an intriguing, good guy for day 3. I think Devon Vele, who had a great rookie year for the Broncos last year and was a priority guy when the draft was over. One I definitely looked at him, and then the guy from Holy Cross, who's literally on the Panthers, my favorite team. I forget his name, but those 2 guys were guys that last year when the draft ended, I was like, hey, these are good priority free agent pickups. I don't know if Armstrong will be exactly that, but if he will be not drafted, but I think he could be similar to Vele there in terms of a good polished guy who had a good combine and just kind of fell for external reasons. And then Efton Chisholm III. He is out of Eastern Kentucky, or Eastern Washington, I believe. He dominated versus lower competition, just a good slot receiver, and is kind of similar to Cooper Kupp. He's kind of a discount Cooper Kupp. So I'm not saying he's going to be Cooper Kupp, but if there were to be one, he's very similar, from the same exact school, and plays very similarly. But he's a much lower athlete than Kupp was. But just keep an eye on him. He might be kind of interesting. Efton Chisholm III. Next is going to be tight end. I have Mitchell Evans out of Notre Dame. I have him as my tight end 6 to 7, and I have him as a 4th round guy. Consistent, really good hands. Won't do much after the catch, but needs to kind of be stronger, but still good at the catch point. Good in contested catch situations. Is dropping because of injury, and he kind of played through it this year, but was much better in 2023. I think is a valuable, good tight end too for a team that is maybe, let's say they have an injury-prone tight end 1, or maybe a way more receiver-heavy tight end 1 who can't really play inline tight end. I think Mitchell Evans is good for that because he can kind of do that, but he's still a capable receiver as a tight end. And then honorable mention here, I have Oronde Gadsden II out of Syracuse. Very much a guy that we were just talking about, receiver heavy. Honestly, might just be a big slot receiver. That might just be what he is. But I think he's going a little bit too low, or at least projected. He's kind of all over the place, but it seems like a lot of them have him really low on day 3. But I think he could go a little higher on day 3. Really big wingspan, good athlete. I think he's just really intriguing for a receiving prospect that, obviously not traditional tight end. But if you really want a guy maybe that could play that role, I think that he could totally do that, and you can get some good value there late day 3. Next, we have a few offensive linemen here. First is going to be Charles Grant out of William and Mary. I have him as around a top 10 offensive lineman, just including all offensive linemen in the class, and I have him as a round 3 pick. This is a guy I'm really intrigued by, who if I was a GM, I'm honestly willing to take a flyer on, because he's in an important position and is a really good athlete and super quick. His kind of lack of strength is kind of maybe what limits where he can succeed. Obviously, speed rushers versus power rushers. But he has the length to play tackle, and he played tackle in college. But he also could move into guard and be a really good zone blocking guard. He's a former 0-star recruit, former wrestler actually, and then went into football at William and Mary. If he gets stronger, which is totally possible, I think he could be a really nice pick for an offensive line or needy team, or just anyone who picks him on day 2 or later, who can actually develop into a starter. Maybe another smaller school guy like Cody Mouch from North Dakota State, who is currently with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, had a terrible rookie year. really actually good this past second year, and he was a tackle and then moved into guard for them. So that could be kind of what he does. Again, it'll take a minute, like at least a year, but his athletic testing for an offensive lineman was just super good, especially speed-wise, one of the faster offensive linemen, which would help a lot on the outside for, obviously speed rushers that are coming in, but also if you're a guard, that kind of stuff goes quickly, and you can't pull over to the other side of the offensive line being super slow. So teams that run that kind of stuff, like the Dolphins, like that'd be pretty good for them there if they need kind of that stuff. But a lot of people do that. I'm just trying to think of a general team in mind. But big stuff there is a zone blocking tackle who's got some good upside. If it's a good situation with no like insane rush to be a really good starter, I really like the outlook for Charles Grant. Next is going to be Ozzy Trapilo out of Boston College. I have him around the 8th to like 10th ranked offensive lineman, and I also have him as a 3rd round pick. And he's just not much to say. Like, he's just a solid, like, rotational / capable starting tackle. More of a pass blocker, so that's kind of where he gets most of his bread and butter. Ideal height and weight, so you don't have to really worry about that stuff like you might have to with some of these guys that are going a little bit higher. High IQ, very high floor. I think he just looks like a solid starter who can actually, like, you're not worried about playing tackle based on his size. Like, you're not worried about that. And so I think that's pretty valuable in the 3rd round for a very, like, desperate offensive line team, or one that really values the O-line that has a hole there. Like, he can start right now, but would be good maybe rotating a first year or so, and then I could totally see moving into being a solid starter that you're not freaking out about, replacing, because some of these guys get paid a lot, and like Cam Robinson got paid, and he was not a bad starting tackle. So that kind of type, not play style, but impact, I think could kind of be with Ozzy. And then the last one for offensive lineman is guard Wyatt Milam out of West Virginia. I have him at around the 9th to maybe 11th offensive line prospect, and like a late round 3 guy. When he has played tackle in college, and at the Senior Bowl he was a tackle, or started off at the tackle, and was terrible, very poor. Then the next day he moved into guard and was actually much better and actually good at guard at the Senior Bowl. He had a really good balanced year this year, very smart, much better inside where he can utilize his strength. He's more of a strength guy. I think he can utilize his strength more as a run blocker, as a guard. The PFF comp has him as similar to Will Fries, which is perfect. He was the guy on the Colts who got a ton of money, went to the Vikings. He didn't play a ton, but in the games that he did, the first 5 or 6, he looked really good and finally kind of got his stride going. So I think that's a great comp there. Might take a year or two, but might actually be a good kind of interior offensive lineman, especially in like a run-heavy scheme like Indianapolis, funny enough. Not saying he like 100% should go there or will go there, but something like that, I think that would just be a big get for them, especially if he's there come day 3. I don't know if he will be, but if he is, I think that's a really good day 3 pick. Next, we're going to defense. Starting off, I have defensive interior lineman Darius Alexander, who I have as my 5th or 6th interior defensive lineman. I have him as a late 1st round pick to early 2nd round pick. So I actually do have a very low 1st round grade, but still a 1st round grade potentially on Darius Alexander from Toledo. Great production, great at the Senior Bowl, is older, but I think he has like day 1, like he's an immediate contributor for a team. Like I think if there's a desperate team in the back end, like there are a lot of talented defensive linemen, and I mean there could be a world where all those D linemen go ahead, because that kind of seems to be the rumblings at this point. There's a lot of D linemen are going to go early, but I think this would be a perfect guy for a team that needs someone right now. Has the actual traits. Normally smaller school guys just win based athleticism. No, Darius Alexander has the traits. He's very good with his hands, great hand usage. He had a great year this year, one of the highest graded run defenders of anyone in college this past season, along with like a really good pass rush win rate, which that's a great combo there. Very aggressive mindset, which is really good for interior defensive guys. He tested really well athletically too. I'm just not sure why he's not going higher, to be honest. I think maybe because the ceiling's not crazy, but I think it's good. Like I think he's a good starting player that can play right now. He's a run-first defender with some pass rushing capability. Yeah, I'll take that. He's not Dexter Lawrence level like athleticism, but still a good athlete. I think he could be like a Muhammad Wilkerson type, which was a really good defensive lineman for the Jets way back when, who I believe he won Defensive Rookie of the Year, if I'm not mistaken. So I think Darius Alexander could be that, and I'm interested to see where he goes. As an honorable mention, I do have CJ West. I just didn't have time to fully dive into him, but I want to make it known I have him on this list. I just don't have a lot of notes for him. Out of Indiana, I have him as like a priority. I think he probably around is going to go like third round, somewhere around there. Not too far off from Darius, maybe a little bit of a worse athlete, but bigger, very good run defender. I like it for a 3-4 defensive tackle, maybe a little bit of a nose tackle, somewhere like that. I think CJ West out of Indiana, really good. Keep an eye on him. Next is going to be like a hybrid interior defender, defensive end. We don't really know where he's going to be, but it's Elijah Roberts, who I have, I believe he's at SMU. I have him as like my 8th to 11th ranked interior defender, and I think he's like a priority day 3 pick. He has a wide variety within his rankings. Like some people have him super high, super low. I'm definitely on the higher side, personally. I think he's seen as more of like a flexible interior player. Like he can kind of play, defensive end in a 3-4 or defensive tackle in a 4-3. He can do either of those. Has had great efficiency in production. Had 2 years of just awesome production. He was like one of the highest pass rush win rates of anyone last year. He wins with power. Not a crazy athlete or anything, so he's lacking that like major upside, but has produced super well. His best spot is probably as like a 3-4 defensive end, but I think he could also still be a 4-3 defensive tackle. I think that's my opinion. But he just has all the makings of just a really intriguing pick for day 3 of a guy that's versatile, has production, has solid athleticism. I'm not sure why he's not being talked about or moved up enough. I guess we'll see in the draft. But Elijah Roberts at SMU, I really like there. Next, at the defensive end, I have David Walker, who is an edge rusher out of Central Arkansas. I have him as like my edge, like 12 to 14, and I have him as also a priority day 3 pick. He's one of my favorite players in the class, David Walker is. Not because I think he's guaranteed to be good, but just I really like kind of just the general player he is and all the stuff that comes with him. And I really hope he can make some sort of meaningful impact given his limited situation. Very intriguing prospect. He dominated at college for multiple years. He actually had offers to play at bigger schools like SEC level schools, but he turned it down and wanted to stay because he was committed to kind of the guys that were around him, and he really liked it there at Central Arkansas. Got a Senior Bowl invite, played really well, which makes me feel better about him, but he's really limited size-wise. He's only 6'1", so I'm taller than a defensive lineman who will be in the NFL, so that's kind of interesting. Only 6'1", really small hands, but he's built super stern at like 263 pounds. Very ideal wingspan, which helps a ton. If he had a much smaller wingspan, then there'd be a real issue there. His athletic testing was good, especially his bench. Like, he is very strong and stout. He shows NFL ability. It's just the measurables kind of limit his full-time starting ability. But I think just remembering, like, hey, the Central Arkansas guy, because where he goes, I think wherever he goes, like, your team's probably going to like him. Even if he's most likely, like, a limited usage guy. I'm not saying this is where he goes, but kind of what the Eagles do with all their defensive linemen. They rotate in, they get good guys. Like Jalix Hunt out of Houston Christian was a guy I really liked last year, and the Eagles got him, and it was perfect. He can play in rotation, doesn't need to be on the field all the time. If he gets a scenario like that, I really like it as a day 3 impact pass rusher. He's like a less utilized Yannick Ngakoue. If you remember Yannick Ngakoue, who was actually a good pass rusher defensive end for a few teams, the Lions, I believe, and some other ones, maybe the Seahawks or Ravens, I can't remember. Or like a step below or a lesser Hassan Reddick. Maybe not prime Hassan Reddick, maybe when Hassan Reddick was like just good, and still a little bit lesser than that. But Hassan Reddick, the only reason I say lesser is because Hassan Reddick was a full-time starter. David Walker is not going to be a full-time starter, but I think he can have a similar impact from play to play with just limited number of snaps. So David Walker, Central Arkansas, really like. And then an honorable mention is Elijah Ponder out of Cal Poly. So yes, another kind of small school guy, but he's an intriguing day 3 pick. He was injured last year from a small school and played worse, but his 2023 was really, really good. Had great athletic testing, like much even better than Walker, and he's a similar size to Walker, so he's probably going to be a little lower. He was just hurt last year, so he was going to go later. But Elijah Ponder out of Cal Poly, David Walker out of Central Arkansas, 2 guys I think on day 3 that I really like that you should keep your eye on if your team maybe needs an edge rusher. I have 1 linebacker on this list, not too many linebackers, but it's Cody Simon out of Ohio State. I have him as linebacker 3 or around like 5 or 6, and I also have him as a priority day 3 pick. He projects as just like a good 3-4 inside linebacker, like not the only guy in the middle, but really good supporting piece. He's been a long-time starter, had a breakout year this past season, really good like sound gap defender, like does a real good job filling the gaps against the run. Just a smaller size, so that's kind of the concern, and not a crazy athlete, so that's why he's definitely going to go much lower. But I think his floor is super high. I think he's a really high floor. If your linebacker group really sucks and you suck at defending the run, Cody Simon's an awesome, value to have later on. Again, very good for like a 3-4 where there's poor run defenders in there. I think Cody Simon could have a really good impact. Next, we're going to end it off with the secondary. I have around, I think, 4 or 5 guys here. So let's go ahead and start off with maybe one of my favorite guys on this list, just because of kind of what I just diving more in, like, I don't know, I just really liked him. And that's Darian Porter out of Iowa State. Yes, I love Iowa State guys this year. Not planned, just all the main Iowa State players at the top, like receivers, corners. I just really liked him. I have him as my cornerback 6, and I have him as like an early to mid second round pick. This one's a little more interesting because it's different from all the high floor guys I have on this list. He was injured this past season with a season-ending hip injury. And he had surgery, so he would have been much higher, I think, personally. Maybe way closer to where I actually have him ranked. He used to be a wide receiver not too long ago. Like, I think it was only a year or 2 ago, he was a wide receiver. So he just recently went to corner. So there's still room to improve, but obviously has much better hands than your average cornerback because of his receiving background. He's 6'3" for a corner, which is very ideal size. But the biggest thing was his athletic testing was amazing. Amazing athletic testing. He was 98th percentile for the 40-yard dash. He had a raw athletic score of 9.99. The highest it goes to is 10. That's Nick Emanwari level. Nick Emanwari had a 10. And Nick Emanwari probably could have got a little bit higher. But Darian Porter is an awesome athlete with great size. Like, I think the size helps the most, but still a really good athlete for a guy who's 6'3", which is big because that means he has super long strides and is fast. He didn't have poor production, but it wasn't like anything crazy, as a corner that you would expect going to the NFL. He had like a great zone coverage grade, but like kind of poor in man, and is a really bad tackler, like really, really bad. But I wouldn't like not draft him if I'm in the second round because of the tackling, because while it's obviously important, it's not the end-all be-all for cornerback prospects, tackling. But I think he had one of the lowest allowed completion percentages in the entire country, and he was obviously great in zone coverage, but his man coverage was like which for me, like when I look at that, for a guy with his size, is a little bit odd, but makes me feel good, because if he knows already how to play in zone, and we don't need to fully, like, we teach him that, but like he has that capability and has shown it on a high level in college. A guy with his size, like, we can just use his great size and speed in man coverage, and that's totally something we can fix, because it's so much easier to get him better in man when he's literally huge and great athletically. So I really like that. He is older though, so by the time he maybe is fully there, if he gets to that point, there might not be like a crazy long like prime for his production. His stock is kind of flowing based on injury news. It's just, it does seem to actually maybe be good, so that's kind of ideal. But he's a pro's pro, very professional, mature. I know I've had a lot of high floor guys on this list, but this is one of the few guys where I think he has high upside and like a high upside flyer that I just really like. I think he's got like Marshawn Lattimore, like a less refined Sauce Gardner. Like I think he has that kind of potential. I really do. Realistically, he'll probably be like just a really good cornerback too, who can help match up versus these like crazy big athletes we're getting in the league now. And his prime, again, if he reaches it, is going to be shorter because he's coming out as like a 24-year-old. But for a second round, like if you get a really good guy like that, like in redrafts, that is probably a first-round pick, or just because of the potential impact I think he has. And if not, maybe we're looking back and he's still a second-round pick, early to mid. That's where I have him ranked, and that's where he could go. So I still really like it. So I really like Darian Porter at Iowa State. I really like these defensive backs. This defensive back class I think is underrated. I really do. Next is Jacob Parrish out of Kansas State. I have him as like my 7th to 9th cornerback, and I have him as like an early to mid 3rd round pick. Jacob is smaller and not strong, but a great athlete, blazing fast. He ran a 4.35 40. Solid tackler compared to the rest of the corners in this class, but he can still improve, I think. Just real solid production. Like wasn't bad, wasn't crazy, just really solid. Does a good job of like actually not falling off on his routes that he's defending. Like he does a pretty good job trying to stick to guys, and he can play slot like right now. He's probably going to be more of a slot receiver because of his size, but he can play and start at the slot right now. Super young, super feisty and aggressive. That's been something I've seen coming up a ton. Very feisty, very aggressive. And I think he's a good starting slot cornerback with a ton of passion to play, and I think can still improve. Like he's not that old. I believe he's 21 or 22. So Jacob Parrish out of Kansas State as a slot guy I like. And then the last cornerback here I have is Upton Stout out of Western Kentucky. I have him as an early 4th round pick. I don't know. I mean, I just like these anomalies. I know I've had a lot of anomalies with size. I just really like them because they know how to play. And I think while sometimes it doesn't always work out, we've had a lot of them that have worked out. In terms of this, like just this player, Stout is kind of one that I've really had my eye on and just liked from the beginning. He's, like I said, we've had anomalies with like David Walker and guys like that. This guy is an extreme anomaly with his size, like very small, but he's crazy explosive, like super explosive. Really good run defender and tackler. Might be one of the better, or if not the best tackler in terms of defensive backs in this class. Safeties maybe included, because he played literally everywhere at Western Kentucky. He played safety, outside corner, slot, in the box. He literally had 32 snaps on the defensive line as an edge rusher, which is insane. But again, size for the NFL, it really limits his ceiling. He's 5'8", 181. And, is just short in everything. But he's so explosive as an athlete and is super strong. Like I said, the best kind of tackling nickel in this class. I think, which, for whatever team maybe prefers guys like that, can be really big. Like, it depends on the preference. But if you really need a slot guy that can actually tackle, Upton Stout is your guy, for sure. He's, more of like a 1-year kind of developmental tackle or developmental nickel. Like coverage right now is not great. Like if it's a heavy man coverage like scheme, not ideal. But if you're a heavy zone and you need tacklers, Upton Stout's really good. And I like the potential value and outcome there for a day 3 pick. And then we have the last two safeties. This one being Billy Bowman Jr. out of Oklahoma. I have him as a mid-3rd round pick. Very much, again, an anomaly with his size. Very small, but great speed and coverage production. He's a very poor tackler, but he is, which as the last line of defense is potentially an issue. So I think just having a strong like linebacking core or another strong, like a strong safety being a great tackler would help a lot. But he's great back in coverage. Like he's an awesome free safety. He has had 11 interceptions in 3 seasons, an average passer rating allowed of 69. Both of those very good. So very much your ideal kind of back coverage safety. That's a better coverage guy than a lot of these other safeties in this class. And just a really smart producing deep middle safety who, if he improves at least a little bit on his tackling technique, I think could be a actual really good pick for a team that needs a safety, specifically one back in coverage. And then the last guy on the list is Malachi Moore out of Alabama. I have him as a priority day 3 pick and around like a top maybe 6, maybe 5, depending on who you count as safety in terms of my safety rankings, but definitely a priority day 3 guy. He's, again, smaller, but not great as an athlete, but he was just so good and so sound technically at Alabama that I just think wherever he's projected to go, like, he's just going to be solid. He's been a starter for a long time at Bama, has improved every single season, and finished with a great 2024. Coverage performance, grades, stats, all of them were super good. He can play both slot and safety. I think he's got really good instincts and could be a starter right now, which on day 3 is super ideal. And I want to kind of emphasize that because, that's what this draft is. This draft, like, the gap of talents from the mid first round pick to maybe some guys like even in the 3rd round is not that massive. It's not. And I think with guys maybe deep in day 2, some of them falling to day 3, like, getting a few potential like solid starters in this class on the cheap with their contracts, that's the biggest win for teams. So I think teams that are only searching for home runs, I think might fail more than expected. And so I think if you're doing that, you probably should have multiple picks like Seattle, like, Chicago. But even then, it would depend on the team. If I'm Seattle, sure, I'll take home run picks on maybe guys that I don't love but could absolutely do really well. And, when I do my draft rankings, which, yes, I go very in-depth on the draft rankings, so please watch that video after the draft comes out, and I'll have a mock draft video out soon. A team that could pick this guy, if he fits their scheme, and if he also maybe fits their timeline, that'll be better than like the Bears, who I think the Bears go get guys that are like good starters right now. Like, you don't need to hit home runs and all these crazy players and then boom, maybe you strike out on all of them and you come away at this draft with crappy players. Like, fill the holes that you can because you are a potential playoff team if you can hit these, 1st, 2nd, 3rd round picks. Like, it really depends on the team. But I think if you come away with like 2 to 3 starters right now, and maybe, maybe subtract the starters, maybe one starter, maybe one starter, one spot starter, but one really good developmental guy that ends up being even better in 2 years or so, that's a win as well. Like, there's just not many real blue chip guys or crazy, like, super crazy upside, but lower, like all the guys that have upside that are lower because they have massive drawbacks and because their upside isn't as massive as other prospects. But getting these starters right here, like, it helps in like one spot with a super cheap contract to where you can put that money towards another kind of issue that maybe you can get a better player right now. That's how teams win Super Bowls. This is how they do it. Replenishing good starters, keep cheap contracts through the draft. And some of these guys, I think, are guys who could be just really good value for teams to try and help with that journey for the teams that kind of win Super Bowls. This is how they do it, getting these cheap guys on contracts that are pretty good starters. But that'll do it for my sleepers video. Keep an eye out for mock drafts on both my channel, on Mathis NFL. I'm going to do a mock draft as well. But we'll have one final one here, and then we'll have the draft. And then once it's concluded, I will go ahead and give out my grades that I do a lot of deep dive stuff on, and you guys can go check that out as well. So, as always, thank you for watching. Stay smart, stay sharp, and I will see you guys later. Peace.